Rome did not fall asleep under prayer that night. It groaned. In the year 964, whispers spilled through candlelit corridors and shuttered taverns. Messengers moved quickly through narrow streets. Doors were barred. Candles were extinguished early. The Pope was dead. Not peacefully, not sanctified. He had been struck down in bed, caught with another man's wife, according to some. Others said a jealous husband burst into the chamber and crushed his skull. A few insisted the Pope collapsed mid-act, felled by a sudden stroke, and a smaller, more satisfied group whispered that God himself had finally intervened. No version could be confirmed. None needed to be, because the Pope who died that night was only 27 years old, and Rome had long stopped pretending he was holy. John XII became Pope at 18, not through divine calling, not through virtue, but because his father, Alberic II of Spoleto, ruled Rome like a private kingdom. Alberic was not emperor, not pope, not king. He was something more practical. He controlled the militia. He controlled the nobility. And most importantly, he controlled who sat on the papal throne. By the early 10th century, the papacy had lost much of its spiritual insulation. It was no longer merely influenced by Roman aristocrats. It was owned by them. Titles passed between families. Alliances were sealed with blood and marriage. The Bishop of Rome had become another prize in Rome's endless political game. John was born Octavian, raised not as a priest but as an heir. He grew up surrounded by weapons, tutors, servants, and courtiers who bowed to his father. He learned how to command before he learned how to confess. He learned how to bargain before he learned how to pray. When Alberic died, the succession was already decided. Rome's nobles swore that Octavian would become pope, and so he did. Shedding his birth name and assuming the title John XII, he inherited the throne of St. Peter before he was old enough to fully understand its weight. John XII did not ascend to a church. He inherited a machine. The papacy he received was already hollowed out by decades of corruption and compromise. Offices were bought and sold. Positions were granted for loyalty, not learning. Moral authority had eroded slowly, replaced by political survival. But John was different from his predecessors in one crucial way. He did not pretend. Where earlier popes cloaked their vices in ritual, John abandoned the performance entirely. He made no effort to project sanctity, no effort to reform, no effort to restrain himself. To Rome's aristocracy, this was tolerable, even useful. A weak, indulgent pope was easy to control. To the clergy, it was catastrophic. The Lateran Palace ceased to resemble a church. It became something else entirely. Contemporary chroniclers, especially Liutprand of Cremona, described scenes that bordered on the unbelievable. Gambling tables set up where prayers had once been spoken. Wine flowing openly through the halls, visitors arriving at all hours of the night. Women came and went freely, so did men. John made no distinction between sacred and profane spaces. The papal residence, once a symbol of apostolic authority, was now infamous across Europe. Bishops complained they were unsafe in Rome. Pilgrims avoided the city. Clergy whispered that the Pope himself was a danger. John was accused of turning the papal palace into a brothel. He hunted instead of officiating Mass. He drank excessively. He swore oaths to pagan gods during dice games. He toasted the devil openly, according to hostile accounts. He ordained bishops in exchange for money. He promoted teenage boys to high office. He allegedly ordered blinding mutilations and executions of political enemies. And yet, he remained Pope. What made John XII uniquely unsettling was not merely his behavior, it was his lack of shame. He did not deny the accusations. He did not attempt reform. He did not even pretend repentance. His authority, he believed, came from power, not purity. Rome had seen immoral popes before, but they hid, they negotiated, they played the long game. John played none of it. Whether Liutprand exaggerated or not, and many historians believe he did, the portrait endured because it aligned too perfectly with Rome's experience. The Pope behaved like a feudal lord, not a shepherd of souls, and Rome began to look beyond itself for correction. The solution arrived from the north. Otto I, King of Germany, had long desired imperial legitimacy. To become Holy Roman Emperor, he needed papal coronation. John XII, threatened by rival Roman factions, needed military protection. Their alliance was born of desperation on both sides. Otto marched into Rome in 962. John crowned him emperor, and for a brief moment order returned. But Otto listened. Roman nobles complained. Clergy testified. Accusations accumulated rapidly. Adultery, perjury, sacrilege, simony, murder. John was said to have invoked pagan gods, violated church law, and mocked the sacraments themselves. Otto did not act immediately, but he did not forget. When Otto left Rome to campaign elsewhere, John resumed his old habits. Worse, he began plotting against the emperor who had just saved him. Otto returned. This time, John fled Rome. In his absence, Otto convened a synod in St. Peter's Basilica. It was an unprecedented act. A pope was not meant to be judged by men. The charges were read aloud. Witnesses spoke openly. The record painted a picture of total moral collapse. John responded with a threat. Any cleric who dared judge him would be excommunicated. The synod responded by deposing him anyway. A new pope was elected, Leo VIII, installed under imperial protection. For a moment, it seemed the nightmare was over. But papal authority does not dissolve easily. Many Romans refused to recognize Leo VIII. Others resented imperial interference more than papal corruption. The idea that an emperor could remove a pope terrified the church as much as John's behavior had. When Otto left Rome once more, the city reverted to its old patterns, and John XII returned. John did not come back quietly. He returned with armed supporters. His enemies were hunted down. The new pope was captured, mutilated, and publicly disgraced. Supporters were executed. Clergy were intimidated into submission. John reclaimed the papal throne and resumed exactly where he left off. No repentance followed, no lessons learned. The brief interruption had only hardened him. Rome fell silent, not in reverence, but in exhaustion. Less than a year later, John was dead, killed in bed. The circumstances remain unclear. A jealous husband, a violent altercation, a sudden medical collapse. No official account survived intact. What survived instead was the symbolism. The Pope died not at the altar, not in prayer, not surrounded by clergy, but in scandal, Rome did not mourn. There were no public laments, no great outpouring of grief, only relief, quiet, unspoken. The Church moved quickly to stabilize itself. John XII became an embarrassment to be contextualized, minimized, or explained away. Chroniclers hostile to him were dismissed as exaggerators. Sympathetic accounts emphasized his youth, his environment, his manipulation by Rome's aristocracy. And yet the damage was undeniable. John XII became the benchmark, the cautionary tale, the example whispered whenever papal power threatened to detach itself from moral restraint. Was John XII truly the worst pope in history, or was he something else? A child raised for power, handed absolute authority in a city that devoured the unprepared. His reign forces an uncomfortable question. Was the failure personal or systemic? The Church survived him. Rome moved on. But the story remained, circulated, condemned, and never fully erased. A reminder that holiness does not automatically protect the institutions built in its name. The keys to heaven were never meant for boys. They were never meant for inheritance, intimidation, or indulgence. And yet, for a brief and disastrous moment they were, and Rome learned, too late, that sacred power, once detached from restraint, does not collapse quietly. It corrodes. John XII was not remembered because he was unique. He was remembered because his story was inconvenient. It exposed what happens when power is inherited instead of earned, when authority is handed to the unready, when systems meant to protect instead enable collapse. And history did what it always does with stories like that. It turned away. It softened the edges. It buried the discomfort beneath ritual and tradition. But that instinct, to disguise danger inside familiar shapes, did not stop with popes. It found its way into stories told to children. In the next episode, we follow a boy named Jack, a poor child, a foolish trade, a towering giant, a tale we pretend is harmless. But like Rome in the 10th century, the story hides something older and darker beneath its surface. Because Jack was not brave. The giant was not simply evil, and the beanstalk was never meant to save anyone. It was meant to justify what came next.